بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. فما بعد, my brothers and sisters, thinking about the mission of Rasulullah, the Quran is called Al-Furqan because it separates the good from the evil. The Battle of Badr was also called Al-Furqan for the same reason. Islam will always call its followers to make the choice between good and evil, so let us be prepared. I'm just coming from a interfaith dialogue session which had Jewish rabbis, which is basically Reformed and conservative Jewish rabbis and priests and Christian priests of various denominations. And one of the things that they talked about and they mentioned was their attitude towards their religious books. Because I had these people who were talking and saying things which were, frankly, I mean, if it was something which was, if somebody spoke like that about the Quran, I would say that this person was being highly disrespectful, maybe to the point of committing kufr. But these were people, they were not speaking about the Quran, they were speaking mainly about the Torah and the Bible. So I listened, I mean, obviously for a while. And then I said, and they were talking about argument, and they said that we have arguments and we don't just accept the Bible or the Torah. We said, well, this is what it is, this is what it says, but my understanding and my reading of it is different. And I go by my reading, meaning that their understanding and reading of the religious text, of the sacred text, no matter that, you know, in their case it has been changed and so on, but still it is considered a sacred text. Their point being that my argument or my understanding about that is at the same level as the text itself. So effectively they are saying, well, Allah said this and I'm saying this, and both these statements are at the same level. So I said to them that, I said, we also argue. I said, Muslims also argue. We are extremely argumentative people. And we argue about the text. We argue about the Quran and the Sunnah, and so on and so forth. But our arguments are based on one fundamental principle. There is a fundamental principle on which all our arguments stand and at which all our arguments end. And that fundamental principle is that the text is correct. That the text is correct, number one. Number two, that the text is unchangeable. This is the word of God, this is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is correct, and there is no question of any doubt that it can be anything but correct. And secondly, that it is unchangeable because it is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not our word, and so therefore we do not change it. So this is the thing. So what is the argument about? The argument, if you want to call it argument, maybe more correctly it would be, you would call it a reflection to try to understand, is how my life at present, the challenges that I face, the decisions that I'm called upon to make, and so on, how these sync with what the text orders me to do. And what we try to do is to bring those arguments. We don't say believe it because whether you like it or not, believe it whether you understand it or not. And no, we say believe it because it is right, and bring your understanding to the point where you see how it is right. So when we, within quotes, argue, or when we reflect and introspect and we debate and we have discussions and dialogue on the text, on the Quran and the Sunnah, they all come from this fundamental basis to say that this is unchangeable, this is completely and totally correct, there is no possibility of doubt or error in it, la rayba fihi. And we say that we need to rethink and we need to understand and we need to reinterpret our realities in a way where they sync with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us. So we take lessons from this to apply in our lives. Now, this is the issue of the Quran being the Al-Furqan, the criterion between good and evil. It's not only related to or restricted to haram and halal, this is right, that is wrong, for example, and what Allah has prohibited and what He permitted. That is obviously part of it, but it's not restricted to that. It's not that is not sufficient to understand. What we have to expand it is to take this and say, how does the Quran and the Sunnah, how do the Quran and the Sunnah apply to every aspect of my life? And that is the focus and the understanding that we need to go with. Now, Rasulullah made elaborate preparations for the Hijrah. All of this is also for us a great education in the whole business of planning and strategizing and anticipating in a way where when the time comes to make the change, that change is beneficial and we take care of the any potential problems with the change. So it is very important to make all the effort that is required for something before making dua for success. And that is the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sta'inu bis sabri wa salat. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, O you who believe, take help from sabr. And sabr here doesn't mean just sitting there and waiting for things to happen. Sabr means not just patience as we wrongly understand patience as doing nothing, but patience as in making every effort, doing all that we need to do with patience, meaning that we don't do it in a hurry, we don't do it half-heartedly, or we don't miss things. We make sure that everything is done, and then we stand and we make dua and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His help. The finest example of this is Rasulullah SAW behavior in the Battle of Badr, where he took all precautions and he used all the resources. They were meager resources. He didn't have much, but whatever he did have, he used it all very positively and very powerfully to the best of his ability. And then he stood in dua and he made dua and he said, Oh Allah, help me as you promised to help me, and do not allow these people of my followers to die here. Do not allow them to be defeated, because if they are defeated, if they are destroyed, then there will not be anyone on the face of the earth to worship you. So this was his dua, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Allah sent the help of an army of malaika, of angels, who came and fought alongside, shoulder by shoulder, shoulder to shoulder with the Muslims against their enemies. So making the effort. Now sometimes we forget this and we do not make effort, and we simply make dua and we ask Allah, and then we don't get what we ask for, and then we are disappointed. But we need to remind ourselves that effort is absolutely critical. Without making the effort, if we make dua, then more than likely that dua will not be accepted. Also very important, part of the effort is the whole is whatever is required. So it's not just material, but it is picking the right companions, right kind of team. If where there is confidentiality is involved, to maintain that confidentiality, to maintain that secrecy, not to tom-tom your plans and so on all over the place. This is one of the very important and probably one of the main reasons that good efforts fail, because you publicize them too early. So it is, it's like planting. If you take a fully grown oak tree, it's a huge, massive tree, and it's extremely strong, and it's roots going deep down in the earth. It can withstand all kinds of storms and so on. But the same oak tree, when you plant it and it sprouts, it's a little green seedling, at that time it's not strong, it's very weak. One flick of the finger like that, you can break it, anybody can pull it out, throw it away, anything can do, if it's a grazing animal can eat it, and so on. So it's vulnerable, it is weak, it is incapable of surviving unless it is protected. But once it grows, to its full size, then there's no problem. Now this is what we do, unfortunately, with our projects and so on. You talk about them too early, and as a result, it gets attacked while it is still a growing shoot, and then of course it is destroyed. So all the dreams, they are left high and dry. Now you might say, well, if I need help from people, if I don't talk at all, I'm not saying don't talk at all. I'm saying don't put it on Facebook, right? Don't publish it all over the world. If you need help from people, go talk to those specific people. People who are with whom you have a confidentiality. People whose who you trust, and so on. So therefore, and then we can, and then the thing can go from there, right? So this is the important thing to do. So not send it all over the place. Now, Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu was very well known all over the Hijaz and so on, but Rasulullah was not. He was a much more private person. So when sometimes when they met people in the desert as they were going, somebody would recognize Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu, and they would say, "Who is this man?" And Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu would say, "This man is a guide, and he's showing me the path." So now he's telling the truth, but not necessarily in the way the man is asking the question. Rasulullah is the guide. He is the one who shows us the truth. This is the job of the Nabi. But guide in this case is Abu Bakr Siddiq doesn't mean doesn't mean it as someone who's just showing the way geographically. He's talking about showing the way in every possible way. Aisha radhiyallahu anha is the narrator of the whole story of Hijrah. Asma bint Abi Bakr radhiyallahu anha, who was the sister of Aisha Siddiqa radhiyallahu anha. Aisha Siddiqa radhiyallahu anha says that Abu Jahl came when he got wind of this, that Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu and Rasulullah had left. Abu Jahl came to their house, and he asked them, where is, she asked Asma radhiyallahu anha, who opened the door, where is Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu. So she said, I don't know. So Abu Jahl slapped her on the face. He was a very brave man when there was no one to defend the women. So this is the, imagine, it's not just a matter of physical slap. The issue is that here is this man, Asma bint Abi Bakr radhiyallahu anha was the daughter of one of the person who was a judge among the Quraysh. Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu was also a judge. So somebody with that kind of izzah, this man is treating his family in this way. Then her grandfather, who was at that time Abu Quhafa, who was at that time not Muslim, he became Muslim after Fatah Makkah. He came and he said to them, to his granddaughters, I see that my son has put the two of you to suffering because he left, he took everything and he did not leave anything behind for you. So Asma, Abu Quhafa was blind. So Asma radiallahu anha, she put some rocks into, some stones into a leather bag, and she took the hand of her grandfather and she said, feel this, and he felt it. So he said, no, this is gold inside this, and he left it for us. So protecting the honor of your men is a sign of nobility among women. Women who make fun of their men, who mock their men, their husbands and brothers, fathers, so on, and who talk about their men to others are without shame and without honor. And obviously the same thing goes for the men. So treating each other with respect, honoring each other. I'm not saying you don't have differences with each other. Of course you have differences, and you can, when you have a difference, you talk about it and you resolve it. But being insulting, being mocking, then especially before others, many times I've seen this thing, men and women, they joke, but the joke is not really laughing with people, but laughing at people. And they joke about each other in front of others. It's very shameful, very regrettable, and that is not something that that is doable. The second thing is Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu also. Imagine this was something that really characterized him always, that when it came to Islam, he gave everything. I mean, people gave, like many years later in the Ghazwat al-Tabuk, where Rasulullah was fundraising for the Battle of Tabuk. Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu gave everything. So similarly in this case, with respect to the Hijrah, he took everything from his house, and he gave it in the path of Islam. He gave it to Rasulullah for his purpose. Again, as I mentioned before, Rasulullah took with him the best companion, and his entire family were one with him in the sense of by family I mean his wife and his children were one with him in spending in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the love for Rasulullah. Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu was wise, he was intelligent, a wonderful human being. He was a great leader, he was knowledgeable. His particular specialty was genealogy. He was an expert in the genealogy of people, which was a very big thing among the Arabs. And unfortunately we have lost these things. That's very sad, because we don't know where we come from, we don't know our roots. I mean, I don't mean myself, because I do know, but I've seen most people, they don't know their roots, they don't know where they come from, so they lose the heritage, because the history is our heritage. And because if you come from places and from a lineage which is honorable, where people are, your ancestors were people who did some good things, scholars and so on and so forth, and other kinds of things, people in positions of power and authority who used it well and did a good job. All this gives you a good feeling, gives you a sense of satisfaction, gives you a sense of confidence, a sense of self-respect, and all of these are very important things for a person, and these are things which in the old days, when people lived together in big joint families, this is what the older people, the elderly and the elders, this was their job. This was something that they did. They brought this whole, they were the repositories of history of the family, of the people, of the race, of the community, and this they transferred to the younger generations. Very sadly, in my view, one of the biggest losses that has happened to us in this whole issue of modernity and modernization is the nuclear family, is the joint family being broken up, where elders are discarded, relegated, left somewhere, either in old people's homes, or by themselves to live their last days in a lonely way, even if they are materially well provided. So the family is opting to do without that knowledge and that experience and that entire wealth of life history that the elders can bring into their lives, and they think they are doing a good thing. They think that, okay, these are useless people. This whole concept of that you become useless the day you turn 65 or the day you turn 60 or something. This is a industrial revolution related thinking, where people's physical strength is equated with everything else. And when a person becomes elderly and maybe they can't lift weight anymore, they are just thrown somewhere and put out to pasture. There has to be a difference between a bullock and a human being, but unfortunately there doesn't seem to be. Now, in some cases, while they were going on this during the Hijrah, Rasulullah and Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, they kept their identity secret, and as I mentioned to you, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu would say, "He's my guide." In other cases, they would give dawah to some people and they would reveal their identity. One of them was Burayda al-Aslami radiallahu anhu, who became Muslim, and then later on he took part in 16 out of 19 battles that the Muslims fought. He gave dawah to two thieves, and they accepted Islam. He gave dawah to a shepherd. He milked one of Rasulullah. This is what he's doing on the way. The two thieves, and they accepted Islam, and he gave dawah to a shepherd. He milked one of the goats. The shepherd said none of them have milk, but this goat gave a lot of milk. The Prophet accepted Islam, but told him to wait until he ﷺ had declared himself openly. Rasulullah ﷺ and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu were traveling in the hottest part of summer. They went down the valley to Quba, to Babi Amr ibn Auf. The sun was almost at its zenith and it was extremely hot. It was Monday, the 12th of Rabiul Awwal, when Rasulullah ﷺ reached Medina. The Ansar used to go out of Medina every day because they had news that he was coming, so they would go out of Medina every day and wait for Rasulullah ﷺ. But when the sun got very hot, they would go indoors. One day there was a Jewish man who was on top of a high building, and he saw on that particular day, he saw Abu Bakr Siddiq and Rasulullah ﷺ coming. They were dressed in clean white clothes because they met Zubayr bin Awam radiallahu anhu, who was returning from a trade journey, and he gifted them new clothes because their clothes had been travel stained. The Jew who saw them called out to the Arabs at the top of his voice, says, "Oh Arabs, the one you were waiting for has arrived." So of course there was great rejoicing and singing and so on. Some of those nasheeds we sing today as well. Rasulullah ﷺ stayed in the house of Sa'd bin Haythama radiallahu anhu, in a bachelor's house, as it were, because there were a lot of people coming to visit him. He didn't want to disturb any person who had a family who had women in the house. He built the masjid of Quba, and today if you go pray there in the masjid of Quba, 2 rakat of salah in this masjid has the reward of an umrah. Alhamdulillah. Salah in Masjid al-Nabawi Sharif, 1 rakat has the reward of 1000 rakat, and Salah in the Haram in Makkah, al-Masjid al-Haram, 1 rakat has the thawab of 100,000 rakat. Rasulullah ﷺ sent word to Medina asking permission to enter. The people of Medina sent out a large delegation, and they said, "Come in and you will be safe and you will be obeyed." So they sent out a big delegation, and this was the message that the delegation communicated. They said, you come in and you will be obeyed. Rasulullah ﷺ was not entering as a guest. He was entering as a ruler. The Ansar made this very clear. When he neared Medina, people came into the streets to greet him. They climbed on top of houses and trees. to see him calling out to one another and beating drums and singing and dancing in the streets. Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu, he says that I witnessed 2 days in Medina, one the best day and the other one the worst day. The best day was when Rasulullah entered Medina, and the worst day was the day he passed away, and I witnessed both of them. This was Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu, who was the companion and the servant of Rasulullah for his entire time that he stayed in Medina. Medina, as we know, was called Yathrib, and when Rasulullah came there, it got the name of Madinatul Munawwara, the city of brilliance, the city of light, because Rasulullah came there. I remember myself and you that this is also the reality of bringing the Sunnah into our lives, that our lives become munawwar, they become full of light and beauty. Rasulullah when he came to Medina, he wanted to stay with his relatives, the Banu Najjar. They were from the Khazraj, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's ancestor Hashim married one of the women of Banu Najjar, and so the maternal uncles of Abdul Muttalib were from Banu Najjar. So he asked, who is closest to me in relationship? So Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, he said, Ya Rasulullah, I am closest to you in relationship. And Rasulullah stayed in his house. Also we know the story where his camel, people were trying to grab the reins of the camel and pull the camel to their house and so on. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Hiya Mamura, leave her, she is under control. And this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's control. And this camel came and stopped in front of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari's house, and that is where Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam dismounted and he stayed there. Now it was a 2-story house, and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam persuaded Abu Ayyub al-Ansari to allow him to stay on the ground floor, like in America you say first floor. And Abu Ayyub radiallahu anhu and his wife, they didn't want to stay on the first floor. They say, Ya Rasulullah, you stay on the first floor because we don't want to stay above you. But Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam persuaded him. Then what happened was that night or the next night, I'm not sure if it was the same night or it was a night later, but whatever it was, they on top, when they were there, they had a container of water. Now Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wanted to stay on the ground floor, on the first floor, ground floor, because he said people will come to meet me. If I'm on the top floor, then people will have to pass through the ground floor to go on top, and it's a disturbance for your family. So he didn't want that. He preferred to stay on the ground floor because he didn't want to disturb the family of his host. So anyway, finally they agreed to stay on top. Then that night there was water in a container in there on the floor, on the top floor, and somebody knocked it over, so it spilled. There was water all over the floor. Now they ran, Abu Ayyub al-Ansari and his wife, they ran to mop up this water, and they had nothing else to use but their own some extra clothes and blankets and so on, all of which they used to mop up the water so the water wouldn't leak through the floorboards and fall on Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This was the level of love of the Nabi Alayhi Salam. Now with the result that of course everything was wet, so that night they froze. I mean, it was a very cold night, and it was very it was not comfortable obviously. So when Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam heard about this the next morning, he insisted that they should change, and eventually so he went and the other way around, they insisted. Abu Ayyub Ansari and his wife, they insisted that Rasulullah should stay upstairs. They say, Rasulullah, this is not good. He agreed, and he stayed in the house for 7 months. Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu was the man who brought the first gift for Rasulullah. He brought a bowl with bread crushed in milk and butter, and he said to Rasulullah, my mother sent this for you. And Nabi said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless her. Sa'd bin Ubadah radiallahu anhu, who was one of the leaders of the Ansar, he brought a bowl with bread crushed in meat gravy for him, and so also this continued, and people would bring food as gifts for Rasulullah every day. We will continue inshallah with our lesson on the seerah of Rasulullah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to learn from his beautiful seerah and to benefit from it. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin.